Hello there, good morning and welcome to my little arty corner on YouTube. My name's Angela and I used to be a science teacher, but I'm now an artist and I still like to teach. And I'm hoping that my videos will encourage you to give a go for drawing, not for any other reason other than pleasure, not for any judgment, but because you enjoy the process. And like with everything, the more you do, the more you understand yourself, your style, and the more you develop hand-eye coordination and the skills, and just trying things out as well. Sometimes there is nothing better than just sitting and drawing for sheer pleasure with no expectation of the outcome, but just because it's a lovely, peaceful, relaxing, meditative kind of thing to do. And that's what I hope to encourage you in doing. I favour whimsical and stylised art, a bit of Zentangle patterns in here, more than the traditional kinds of Zentangle inspired, but I'm definitely veering towards the cute and whimsical far more these days. I think that's something to do with me finding my voice and also the value of a sketchbook, which I've talked about previously in previous videos and I may talk about today. But I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who's subscribed to my channel. I appreciate you more than you know. I'm over 700 now, which is astounding to me. I never thought I would have got one, to be honest, but that's astounding. So thank you very much. And thank you for all the likes to my videos and the lovely comments that are left. I really appreciate that. And if you've shared my video with others who you know might appreciate them, I appreciate that too. So this is part 2 in a series of motifs, I suppose. I haven't really worked out how to describe this, but my plan is that over a series of days, perhaps a week, I fill a sketchbook page or a piece of paper the size of a sketchbook page, more or less, with motifs on a theme, and perhaps exploring different ways of adding pattern to them, of adding colour or texture, and just seeing where it takes us. Different line weights, all sorts of things. So I'm doing oyster shells at the moment, and I have got a couple drawn ready. This is yesterday's, this is part 1's, where I showed how to draw this, and I'll try to remember to put a link in the description below the video if you haven't seen it and you want to. And I coloured this purely with alcohol inks, with some warm greys and some peachy, pinky colours. It's very washed out on my camera and I don't really know why. Perhaps somebody somewhere, you know, it's just one of those things, but there is a lot more colour to it with my eyes. So I'm going to carry on doing that today, this idea. So I've got these here because rather than adding shadow with alcohol inks, I want to add shadow with a couple of different things. So the first one is, and I've just realised I haven't picked up my right paper stump, the one I want to use here. Just get that and I'll just sort things out. That's better. I've got just an ordinary graphite pencil. This is quite a soft one, it's a 6B. And I'm going to put graphite underneath where these black lines are darkest. Now my reason for thinking about doing this is partly time, I suppose, in some ways, is that I know it takes me quite a big wedge out of my day, which don't think I'm complaining, I'm not. I really enjoy doing this. But I'm also conscious that by the end of it I can be a bit drained and a bit worn out, I suppose. I don't get on with the work that I really need to do as well. Or work I'm paid for, shall we say. So I'm getting behind with obligations, as in I won't be late for the deadlines, but the pressure's coming on me. But I also thought is that a lot of sketchbook work I'm doing, I'm not actually finishing much off. And I thought it might be nice to see things as they look finished, is to work things through to completion as well, one motif at a time. So I've got here, it's just a paper stump, and I'm just going to use this just to ease that graphite into the paper and to add the shadow there, trying to keep it darkest closest to the black line, which is where I'm working it in first, and then gradually moving it out a little bit to extend that shadow. Now the alcohol markers won't react with graphite. It's in any way, shape or form. Already you can see it's helping to intensify or to really work on that feeling of layers and depth, that this layer I'm working on here is underneath the one on top of it, but over the one below it, and that's that kind of feeling I want to work at here, to get this lovely sense of dimension going. And I will add just a bit of shadow towards the top and towards the left on that particular layer. The nice thing about graphite is that you can go back and add a little bit extra if you need to, or erase it if it's not too far worked into the paper, because you can erase parts of it then. With this one I am remembering here to put a bit of a shadow underneath it. I didn't do that with yesterday's, so it looks like it's very flat on the paper, but that shadow around it, like here, it just helps to give that impression that perhaps this is sitting on the paper rather than being flat with it. I do tend to forget to do this, but then sort of my mind ticks away at other ways of dealing with this, of giving a background, and I was thinking about adding colour, but here I've done it with graphite. So thinking about it, I'm likely to do that, but perhaps when they're all finished. So we've got this one here, so I'm fairly happy with this. Some of these are still a bit not very smooth looking, but I think it'll be okay. I'm trying to remind myself that I'm going to be adding pattern on top of this. So for this one I've got two alcohol markers, the Ohuhu ones. I've got a lighter peachy colour which is called pastel peach, and I've got a slightly darker one which is called fruit peach. But if you've got alcohol markers, then the different brands, then just choose colours that suit. One slightly lighter than the other. And I'm just going to colour all of this in. And I can tell that I'm glad I drew this yesterday and left it to dry, because the ink is no longer smudging. Something for me to remember in future is that these pigment pens, the permanent pens I use, like Microns or the Pentel pigment brush sign pens, or what's the other ones I tend to use? I'm going to use this just to check, yep, the ink's nice and clean, there's no graphite picked up. There might have been a tiny bit on the tip. But things like the Tombow monos and so on, they do take a little bit longer to dry on marker paper. And I'm going to use that shadowed area perhaps as a clue to where I'm going to put some slightly darker colour in. But the colour, I'm not trying to create shadow with this, I'm trying to add some interest to the colours more than anything, and give something that's a bit more interesting than just one colour. And I will come back with a lighter colour just to blend those lines out, to soften the edges, to get the colours blending so that we don't have these harsh lines. Also, part of me knows that that's not an important thing, because I'm going to be drawing patterns and textures over the top of it, but it's nice to do because it helps to get that to blend and to fade and so on. Now this I did draw not long ago, so I'm going to check and see whether we're going to get any smudging of colour. I think I am. But this one, I'm going to use coloured pencils to add shadows to this. So I'm just going to fill this with one colour of alcohol marker. I am aware that not everybody has a huge stash of media like what I do, That's a very I suppose values-ish. It's what we say, you know, like what I do, what I as. So so it's quite nice to show you different ways of doing this. I'm no expert on colouring. Bearing this in mind, please, I am no expert on adding colour or colouring anything in, and perhaps what I do should be taken with a huge pinch of caution. I've got 3 colours here. These are Derwent Colour Soft, and I've got a blush pink, I've got a bright orange, and I've got a red, a scarlet rather than red. And I'm going to use these to intensify colours and shadows in places. I'm not using grey this time, I'm just going to use colour. So I'm going to use the red where I want the shadows to be darkest, because that's the darkest colour I have. And even though it's not a peachy colour, well, there's only one that's a peachy colour. These coloured pencils, the colours are translucent, so when you lay them one on top of the other, they do blend over each other. Well, this marker paper isn't necessarily the best for adding pencil to. It seems to work okay, though it won't take many layers, so it's best to have a light hand and work the layers in. So I can add a bit more and start to widen these shadows a little bit with this colour, especially where the layers get that little bit wider themselves. The nice thing about coloured pencils is you can get this variation in intensity of colour in a way you don't with alcohol markers. You can glaze one colour over another to intensify that colour, but it's really quite subtle, and you really need to use colours that are different. And to get a really nice blend, you really need to use 3, I suppose, or, you know, I've used graphite. In this one as the shadow. It looks mucky. So I think it's because graphite is a dull grey, it's a neutral grey, and I find that makes things look that muckier. I used a warm grey here, which it feels like it goes better with the with these peachy pinks, because they're warm colours. But again, it's a matter of personal preference and working out what works for you. I've actually become quite fond of the warm greys, to be honest with you. I've been doing a lot of work in my lettering sketchbooks, no surprise there, as well as things like this as well. I spend most of my day creating art of one kind or another, maybe not finished pieces of art, but honing my skills, developing ideas, and just trying things out, or just drawing for pleasure. And I'm learning a lot more about myself through the lettering course than I am anything else. So here I am, I've got the colours mostly as I'd like them. It's uninspiring at the back here because the colour's all the same. So I'm going to use this as the lightest coloured pencil I've got. It's a blush pink, it's called. So it's a pinky colour rather than an orangey colour. And I'm just using that to add some variation in colour there. I'm just going to use this to add pink over those oranges and reds to pink them up a little bit. Like so, just to bring it all together. And so I've got that. I guess it would have been useful if I'd left one plain without any patterning and then them coloured, but we've got a video reference if nothing else, haven't I? So I don't know which you prefer. I don't know which I prefer. I think of them at the moment, the graphite is my least favourite. I rather like the vibrancy of colours here. Now there's one other thing that I can do with a coloured pencil, and I could use a blending solution, but they all make me cough and wheeze, set off my asthma. So instead I've got this, I've got a Derwent blender pencil here. I've got various other brands, Prismacolor do them, Caran d'Ache do, and I'm sure many others do. And you don't need to work hard at it, but you just run this pencil over the colours you want to blend and it will blend them together quite nicely. So if you've got some streaky areas, it will help to smooth the streaks out. Where you want edges of colours to blend in, it will do that. And it will also help the colours to shine a little bit, because it gives a clear waxy finish. Even this blender pencil does. Derwent also do one that's called a burnisher, which is just wax, and that adds a shine to these and helps to bring the colours out. I'm just looking here for just perhaps a bit of blending and smoothing. This probably doesn't make a lot of difference. In my head it does. What it has done though is it has picked up some of the pigment from the pen, so that's something for me to note. Okie dokes, let's have a look at this then. So I'm going to add pattern to these to see how that varies and how it looks. So this one I'm just going to pop some lines in, and I'm going to curve them to give a feeling that this is not a flat layer, but that it has a curve to it, like so. And highlights will help here, no doubt. I'm also going to, in this one, I did this yesterday, and I'm going to draw a very narrow band around this, like border. So I separate this layer from this one a little bit, and I fill this with a pattern. And I think for this one, I think I'm going to do shattuck. So I'm going to start with a V shape, and then the line I've just drawn, I'm going to use that to fill the area it's created with parallel lines. So if I go this way, I drew this line, and I'm going to use that line to help me fill this section. And I am drawing these lines straight, and I'm drawing them complete. So I'll often break the lines where I fill the section in to give that a hint of sparkle, but today I'm going to keep them all very much like this. And what I'm going to try to do is to alternate, try to remember, is to alter the density of the layers one to the next if I can. So if we look at the one I did yesterday, I had quite a light density of pattern, much more density of pattern, lighter density and a deeper density. So I'm going fairly quick here. And then here we'll have one there. I'll connect that there and fill that in, and then this will be the next line I draw, so I'll move that back that way. So there we've got shattuck, the Zentangle pattern, which I really like. I love this. It's got that feeling of metal that has a texture put on it to stop it from slipping, being slippery. In this area here, I want a pattern that is lighter. I don't want to use this one again. What I think I'll do is I'm just going to pop in perhaps some little circles, little polka dots, open polka dots. Now these would be perfect for popping a bit of metallic in, I think, if that is your want, desire. Or a dot of highlight in there. So we've got fairly light pattern there, dense pattern, light open pattern, and here I'll add another dense pattern, I think. Me think. I haven't thought what patterns I wanted to use because I just thought I would, well, basically wing it, because that's what I do. Let me have a think. I'm going to do something with lines, I think. But I think I'm going to just do pairs of lines and I fill them in between with little lines. Does that look okay? I think I might go full hog, black stripes with a highlight in the middle, because I think that'll work nicely. Now I've made these quite flat, so I'm going to start to curve them a little now. If the distance between the lines varies a little, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm not measuring this. It's going to work as it works. And I think it'll be quite nice, really. The other thing I could do if I wanted to, once I've added all the pattern, I didn't do it with the first one, but I could decide that I want to intensify shadows in these in-between areas. Now I could do that with the graphite pencil I used here, or I could do it with an alcohol marker or alcohol markers, or even coloured pencils, mix and match. This is going to take me a little while. Yeah, I think my thinking behind approaching sketchbook pages like this is more to give you a bite-sized sample of art, something that you can finish too, but will lead to exploring or trying out different patterns, different ways of doing it on a sketchbook page, just as I am here. But I think it's that bite size that even though these end up looking complicated, you can see that it really is one step at a time. And you break everything down into simple steps, and it's easy to achieve, to accomplish. I'm also aware that not everybody will have alcohol markers, but the principles of adding colour and shadow and varying the colour apply no matter what medium you're using. I seem to have a fondness for alcohol markers. I really don't know why I don't use them more often. I think it's just because they're so blooming awkward for me to get out. In many ways, the full sets take up so much space on my desk. But this is helping me to work out that if I choose the colours I want to use, a limited palette, which is always a very good idea for me, because I do struggle if I've got the whole box to play with, then it's not so bad. So I've just had 2 out today. And I think the set I've got is 120. The Artezas are sat up on the shelf above me in a box, and I can reach them easily. I quite like the brush tips on these. I haven't got the Arteza brush tips. I've got chameleon marker pens as well, which have a brush and a bullet tip, and they're great to use if you want gradients of colour, and particularly colours that perhaps would be difficult to get a gradient with in the way I've been adding colour here, because you literally feed one colour onto the tip of the other, and you get a perfect gradient, and they work really well in small areas, big pages. I struggle with them, but the colours are nice, but there's also that feeling that they're not as clear and as bright as they could be. Says she who just used graphite to dull it down. But now I've done the graphite there, I think I can see that it actually has become part of it. The black has helped to take the attention away from the graphite wholly and created something that is quite dimensional, I think you'll agree. So I'm quite happy with that one. What about this one? Well, you may see me end up using similar kinds of patterns here, because I do have a preference for certain patterns and the way they fill spaces. So here I'm putting in these little arches. I'm going to fill these little spaces around the edge with some of the Pigma Micron. This ink may take a little while to dry on top of the coloured pencil, but I'm fine with that. This one I am going to use dots in rings. So rather than using little lines like I did here, I'm going to use just very fine dots, because I've only got a small area to fill in. I think if I was to go with the lines, it would be more intense than I want it to be. This way it gives it that hint that there's some pattern or texture there. So that's quite nice. This one, I'm going to fill this section here with spirals. So this would be the Zentangle pattern called Print On. So it's just little spirals, and my spirals can be really quite small because I'm using a very fine micron pen here. It's an 01. To draw this particular oyster shape, oyster shell here today, I used a Tombow Fudenasuki pen, and it was the soft version. I think it's the soft version. It's got a blue panel on it. I have so many Fude pens. It's ridiculous, but I really like them for the ability to change the thickness of the line. They've got flexible nibs on them. They're not real brushes. I find brushes really difficult to control. I know it's a matter of practice, but when you've got alternatives that I can find, I work with easily. And also I do a lot of digital work. Well, from time to time I do a lot of digital work. I ink in drawings digitally often. Not always, but often. And the way a Fude pen works is the same as the pressure I'd put on my digital stylus, my digital pen, to increase the thickness of lines as I draw. So it's a similar kind of skill and motion, so it's fixed there. So that works quite nicely. Okay, now for the next layer I want something that's a bit more open, and I think for that I'm going to use circles again, but I think I'm going to use circles that have auras around them. I'm going to let them overlap as they need to, But I'm not going to try and fill all the spaces in between with lines as if we've got circles going on there. I just think it'll be nice to have that suggestion that we've got circles. And I'm going to allow the circles to become smaller as the space gets smaller. And I'm alternating these like so. So that is a lighter, more open pattern. And then the outside one can really be another pattern that is very dense, I think. I really like this, you see. I really like these black stripes. So I'm trying to think how I could do these and it could be different. So we could make them wider and perhaps put a thinner line between them. I'm having to change. Yeah, that works. So I'm drawing 2 lines close together, leaving a bigger gap and so on. I'm having to change the direction of the bend here because it was feeling really awkward going this way, carrying on this way. So I've swapped it round here. I'll carry on with it in this direction. Go around. Some really big in between sections here, and this is where the fun begins because I'm going to fill these sections in and I'm going to fill these wider ones in all with black. Let's go really bold with the black here. I'm not going to leave a line in the middle for the sparkle or the reflection. I'll do that with a white gel pen in a moment. I'm not too sure about that previous layer I did with the circle within a circle. I'm not sure that I like that layer. So I'll think about what I'm going to do while I'm doing this. So I'm using a thicker pen to fill this in simply because it will take me less time, hopefully. I might make a mess here and there in my haste. But there's no need to rush, just take your time and enjoy the process. I like a very clean, very solid black fill. I could have dug out an alcohol marker to do this. But black alcohol markers never seem as densely black as these pigment pens. So nearly all the pens I use for drawing are pigment pens. They're water resistant or waterproof, depending on the particular make. I think they give a very dense black. They vary in density. The Pentel brush sign pen, look at that, I missed. We've got a very wide black area, but that's okay, it is what it is now. And I'll just fill that in and make it what it is. So that's incredibly dense there. And I think that's why this feels awkward, because it's so light. So I think to overcome that, I'm going to pop the middles of these like little balls. So there's circles that have a little highlight towards the top right in them. And perhaps that could be an entire one there. So these ones I may make the actual balls inside them, because nobody's going to, well, they might. It's my drawing, so I can do what I like with it. There we go. That makes me feel a bit better. It feels that there's something more there. So that's quite interesting. Okie dokes. Over to my pencil case. Let's dig out a white gel pen and finish this off. Okay. So I'll just get my scrap piece. This is becoming a scrap piece of paper. It's where I tried out my ideas originally. But I always have something like this to hand, or the back of my hand. So on this one I am adding dots along these highlighted bits here, just to brighten that area up and really give it that whiteness. Now the camera may not pick this up because the camera does seem to wash out colours quite a bit. I'm not going to put a sparkle on the pink in between yet. I'll see how I feel when this has dried. The other lovely thing about using alcohol markers is that the gel pen won't pick the colour up like it would do with water-soluble media, watercolours or brush pens and the like, watercolour pencils. Inktense would be the only exception that I know of to water-soluble media, because Inktense pencils, when they dry, the colour's permanent. Okay, I'll give that a chance to dry. I am going to pop white sparkles in these, where I've left that gap. So I didn't need to leave the gap, but I am going to. It's always a reminder that this is what I want to do. So I'm just going to pop little bits of white there. I'm going to dot across the middle of each of these. And I am kind of drawing it as a line. So I'm following around as if this is the top of the high point of this misshapen ring. So that works quite nicely. I could have put some sparkle here. I could have doubled this up, made it that much thicker, and that could work quite nicely. Here in these ones, I'm just going to put dots of white at the base of the little petals, and I'm going to put some dots of white in that top layer just to make sure that we have that there. For the spirals, I think I'm going to leave it like that, but I'll come back and I might add some shadow underneath them to add some extra texture there. And I'm going to do the same, I think, with the shattuck, where I'm going to add some shadow underneath each of these lines. Here, I think I'm going to take a leaf out of this book and create a sparkle line, a highlight line that goes around the edge. And I could do with a bit more shadow, I think, here, but I think I'll leave that as it is. And the other thing I might do to help lighten this up a bit, this area, is in these in-between spaces, fill it with some tiny little dots of white just to add some speckle and sparkle and a difference in colour density. You can add texture with white, you don't have to add texture and pattern just with black. Okay, that's working fine. I think I know what I'm going to do with these here is to add shadow. I'm going to thicken the outer parts of these spirals towards the bottom and left where I can get to them. Only really the outside or a part that will. Let's get some of that going here, because I think that'll be fine. Yeah, just thickening these lines up towards the bottom. I think I will need to do it through all the layers of each of the spirals towards the bottom, and it just adds that bit more density of ink, but it also suggests these aren't flat, that they are dimensional themselves, and I like that. So I'm often all about dimension, whimsy and dimension, playing with space and the illusion of it, especially in my more abstract stylized work. So that works nicely. I'm going to do something similar with Shattuck, but I'm going to add shadow or thicken the lines of that original zigzag, just to bring some shadow there, as if these are, it's not easy to find out where these are, but we'll get there. Especially in the smaller spaces, which I may just ignore, but just that just helps to give that little bit of texture there. And because I used a graphite pencil there, I'll go back with a graphite pencil. I'm going to sharpen it, so excuse the noise of the sharpener. But 6Bs do become blunt quicker than harder pencils. So I'm just trying to see where I can pop that in. Find my paper stump, got one here. Let's just add that shadow there, perhaps up and under that layer, just there. It just adds that hint of shadow, like so. That works nicely. I think that helps to bring that out a little bit, adds a little bit more texture perhaps. And I may actually do that, may actually add some shadow around the edge of this at the bottom, like so, just to increase that feeling that this is lower than where the highlights are. Careful not to nudge this over the highlights, hence why I'm glad I found this very fine paper stump yesterday. So that just adds a little bit more dimension there. Now I'm very tempted to add this, see if I can add some, don't know if I'm going to be able to over the coloured pencil, so this is a bit of an experiment of using some graphite there. No, it's not going to, maybe because I've used the blender, but it's not happening, so I don't know, there's a little bit of a difference I think. Let's have a look up here and see if we can just get some little bit of shadow going over here. So I am mixing and matching, which is fine. Have a look around the edge here. See if we can just add a bit around there. That helps. I think I might like to, just in these little sections here and some of them, I'll have a look and see how that looks. But I won't do them all with you, because that would be like watching paint dry really at this point. Perhaps I don't need to do them all, because that was just enough to add that feeling or that intensity there. So there we are. We're a little way through my page. So tomorrow we'll have a look at some other forms, all over the ways of drawing oyster shells. I don't know whether I'll get a full page of oyster shells, but you never know. We never know. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you found it useful, and that it's something you'll give a go at, and you'll give a go at drawing along. I'm just going to pop a couple of the media I've used here today so we can see what that is, because that's important. And well, just thank you for joining me, and Again, as I say, if you're willing to share, or if you're going to share what you're doing on social media, please tag me in it. I'd love to see. So until I see you again, take care for now. Look after yourselves and be creative. Bye-bye.